My hand violently trembled as I opened my banking app, tears burning down my cheeks while I sat alone in my car. "Get this beggar out," my father had sneered to the entire room, his voice dripping with disgust. My mother's eyes deliberately avoided mine as security gripped my arm. My heart pounded against my chest, knowing that with one swipe their entire world would shatter and they would never see it coming. Betrayal has a steep price, but today I was the cashier and the bill was overdue. Before I tell you how I bought the very venue my family tried to kick me out of, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who mistook your silence for weakness. My name is Amara, and at 32 years old I own half the commercial debt in this city, but my family thinks I scrape by on minimum wage. To them, I am the black sheep, the failure, the one who did not marry a doctor or a lawyer. I am the stain on this pristine reputation of the Sterling family. I sat in the driver's seat of my dusty 10-year-old Honda Civic, parked in the very back of the VIP lot at the Preston Hills Country Club. Through the windshield, I watched a parade of Bentleys and Porsches rolling up to the valet. This was the social event of the season. My younger sister Jasmine was getting engaged to Hunter, the son of a prominent senator. It was a union of two prominent black families, or so the press release said. I looked down at my phone again. My finger hovered over the execute button on my trading app. My chest felt tight, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage that had been building for 2 decades. I had flown in from New York this morning just for this. I did not want to ruin Jasmine's day, I just wanted to be a sister. I wanted to see if for once, just once, they would treat me with dignity. But 5 minutes ago the illusion had been shattered into a million pieces. I had just pulled into the lot looking for a space when I saw him. My father, Lawrence. He was standing near the entrance greeting the early arrivals, looking every bit the patriarch in his black velvet tuxedo. He looked distinguished, charming, and successful. That was the mask he wore for the world. When he saw my car, his smile instantly vanished. It was like a light switch had been flipped. He did not wave. He did not smile. He marched across the asphalt, his polished shoes clicking aggressively against the ground. He rapped his knuckles hard against my driver's side window. I rolled it down, expecting a hello. "What are you doing here?" He hissed, his voice low so the guests nearby would not hear. "I told you to park in the staff lot round the back." "Hi, Dad, good to see you too," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The valet was full, and I am a guest, remember." "A guest?" He scoffed, looking at my car with unmasked revulsion. "Look at this piece of junk, Amara. You are parked next to Senator Williams' Rolls-Royce. You are blocking the view. You are making us look like trash. We have a reputation to uphold. The Sterlings do not drive rusted Hondas." "It is just a car, Dad," I started to say, but he cut me off. "It is an embarrassment, Amara. You are an embarrassment. I specifically told your mother to make sure you dressed appropriately, but look at you." He gestured vaguely at my outfit. I was wearing a black, oversized blazer and tailored trousers. What my father did not know, because he only recognized wealth if it was plastered with Gucci or Louis Vuitton logos, was that this blazer was a bespoke piece from a quiet luxury house in Italy. It cost $3,000. The fabric was cashmere and silk. It was the kind of wealth that did not need to scream to be heard. But to Lawrence Sterling, if it did not sparkle, it was garbage. "You look like you are going to a funeral or a job interview for a janitor," he spat. "I cannot believe you showed up looking like this. Jasmine is wearing a $20,000 gown. Hunter's family is royalty in this town. And you show up looking like help." He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a money clip. He peeled off a few bills, crumbling them in his fist, before thrusting them through the open window at me. They landed in my lap. A 10 and a 5. $15. "Take this," he said, his eyes cold and hard. "Go catch a bus or an Uber or whatever it is people like you do. Go back to your motel. Do not come inside. I do not want you ruining the photos." I stared at the crumpled bills in my lap. The face of Alexander Hamilton stared back at me on the $10 bill. $15. My father thought $15 was enough to dismiss his eldest daughter. He thought he was being generous. Dad. I flew in from New York, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. It is Jasmine's engagement. And Jasmine deserves a perfect day, he interrupted, leaning in closer, his cologne overpowering the interior of my car. That means no charity cases. No poor relations begging for handouts at the buffet. We invited you out of pity, Amara. Do not make us regret it. Now move this heap before I have it towed. He turned on his heel and walked away, fixing his bow tie, putting that charming smile back on his face as he greeted another guest getting out of a Mercedes. I sat there for a long time. The engine was still idling. The air conditioning hummed softly. $15. I picked up the bills. They felt dirty in my hands. My first instinct was to cry. The little girl inside me, the one who just wanted her daddy to be proud, wanted to put the car in reverse and drive away. I could go back to the airport. I could fly back to my penthouse in Manhattan, overlooking Central Park. I could go back to my life where I was respected, where I was feared, where I was a shark in the financial waters. But then I looked at the country club, the Preston Hills Country Club, a sprawling white-columned mansion that used to exclude people who looked like us. Now it was the playground for the black elite, the people who thought they had made it. My father did not know who I really was. He did not know that the data entry job I told him I had was actually a cover. He did not know that my firm specialized distressed assets bought debt. We bought companies that were failing. We bought loans that people could not pay. We owned things. I looked at the banking app on my phone again. I looked at the transaction pending approval. Buying the debt of the Preston Hills Country Club. The club had been struggling for years, quietly drowning in mismanagement. The bank had put their mortgage up for sale last week. My team had flagged it. I had been debating whether to buy it. It was a risky asset. But now, looking at the crumpled $15 in my lap, the risk seemed irrelevant. I turned off the ignition. I did not move the car. I left the Honda right there, taking up 2 spaces, straddling the line next to the senator's Rolls-Royce. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wiped the single tear that had escaped. I straightened my $3,000 blazer. I am not a beggar, I whispered to the empty car. I am the bank. I opened the car door and stepped out onto the pavement. The humid Atlanta air hit me, but I felt cold as ice. I clutched the $15 in my hand. I was going to give it back to him. I walked toward the grand entrance of the club. The security guard at the door, a large man with a stern face, looked me up and down. He saw the old car. He saw the plainclothes. He stepped forward to block my path. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his hand raised. "Deliveries are around the back." I stopped. I looked him dead in the eye. I did not yell. I did not make a scene. I simply projected the authority that I used in boardrooms full of old white men who wanted to see me fail. "I am not a delivery girl," I said, my voice calm but sharp as a razor. "I am the sister of the bride, and if you do not move out of my way, you will be explaining to Lawrence Sterling why his daughter is making a scene on the front steps." The guard hesitated. He looked over my shoulder at my father, who was busy laughing at a joke nearby. He decided it was not worth the trouble. He stepped aside. "Thank you," I said, not breaking stride. I walked into the foyer. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old money. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of champagne. It was beautiful. It was expensive. It was a lie. I spotted my mother Vivian standing near the entrance to the ballroom. She was adjusting a flower arrangement that looked perfect already. When she saw me, her eyes went wide, not with joy, with panic. She looked around quickly, checking to see if anyone important was watching. Then she rushed toward me, grabbing my arm with a grip that was surprisingly painful. Her nails dug into my skin through the fabric of my blazer. "Amara," she hissed, dragging me toward a secluded alcove near the restrooms. "What are you doing here? Your father said he handled you." He gave me $15, Mom, I said, holding up the crumpled bills. Well, it is more than you deserve, she snapped. Look at you. You are wearing trousers. To an engagement party, I told you to buy a dress. I sent you the link to that nice polyester one on Amazon. It was only $40. I prefer this, I said, pulling my arm away from her grip. You prefer to shame us, she whispered angrily. The Hunter family is here, Amara. Their son is marrying Jasmine. Do you know who they are? They are political royalty. They do not have relatives who look like struggling artists. I am not a struggling artist, Mom. You are struggling enough that you had to drive that death trap of a car here, she retorted. Listen to me. If you are going to stay, stay in the back. Do not talk to anyone. Do not eat too much. And for God's sake, do not mention your job. Tell them you are a consultant. That sounds vague enough to be respectable. I watched my mother. She was beautiful in her designer gown, but her face was tight with anxiety. She was terrified of being exposed as not good enough, terrified that the cracks in our family would show. I will behave, Mom, I said. I just want to see Jasmine. Fine, she said, smoothing her dress. She is over there by the fountain. Try not to upset her. She is very stressed. This wedding is costing a fortune. A fortune you do not have, I thought to myself. But I said nothing, not yet. I walked into the main ballroom, and that was when I saw her, my sister, the golden child, Jasmine. The double doors of the ballroom swung open and the scent hit me first. It was an overwhelming wave of white lilies and expensive perfume, a suffocating sweetness that masked the rot beneath. I stepped onto the plush carpet, and for a moment the sheer scale of the waste took my breath away. My father had not been exaggerating about the cost. The room was transformed into a winter wonderland in the middle of a humid Atlanta spring. Thousands of white roses imported from Ecuador covered every surface. I did the math in my head instantly because that is what I do. At current wholesale prices plus rush delivery fees and the florist's markup, there was easily $30,000 worth of flowers in this room, $30,000 that would wilt and be thrown in the dumpster by midnight. And that was just the flora. The room was packed with the city's elite. I saw councilmen shaking hands with real estate developers. I saw bishops from the megachurches laughing with investment bankers. It was a sea of black tuxedos and sequined gowns. Diamond tennis bracelets caught the light from the crystal chandeliers, sending sharp prisms dancing across the walls. It was a display of power and wealth that was meant to say one thing: we have arrived. I took a breath and stepped fully into the room. The air conditioning was set to a bone-chilling temperature to keep the flowers fresh and the makeup from melting, but I felt the heat of 100 eyes landing on me, then sliding away. It was the way you look at a waiter who dropped a tray or a stain on a tablecloth. Acknowledgement followed immediately by dismissal. I did not belong here. At least that was what their eyes said. In my tailored black blazer and trousers, I was an ink blot on their pristine white canvas. I kept my head high, clutching my clutch bag tight to my side. I was not just Amara the disappointment anymore. I was Amara the owner of this building. I was Amara the holder of the mortgage. Every person in this room was standing on my floorboards, drinking wine paid for with credit that I now controlled. The thought gave me a steel rod of courage down my spine. But before I could make it more than 10 feet into the room, a hand clamped onto my upper arm. It was a claw-like grip, manicured and painful. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. The scent of Chanel No. 5 and disapproval was unmistakable. "Hello, Mother," I said, keeping my voice low. Vivian Sterling did not say hello. She kept that smile plastered on her face, the one she practiced in the mirror, the one that reached her mouth but never her eyes. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked like a mother affectionately greeting her daughter, but up close her eyes were shards of ice. "Come with me," she whispered through her teeth. "Now." She steered me forcefully away from the main aisle, dragging me toward a secluded alcove near the heavy mahogany doors of the restrooms. It was the only corner of the room where the lighting was dim. the place where you put the things you did not want people to see. She released my arm and spun on me, the smile finally dropping like a heavy curtain. She looked me up and down, her nostrils flaring in disgust. I told you, she hissed. I specifically told you to wear the dress I sent you. The pink one with the ruffles. It was polyester, Mom, I said, calmly, adjusting my sleeve where she had pinched me. And I am 32 years old. I do not wear ruffles. You wear what fits in Amara, she snapped. Look at you. You look like a shadow. You look stark. Where is the necklace I sent you? The crystal choker. I swallowed hard. 2 weeks ago, a package had arrived at my penthouse in Manhattan. Inside was a cheap plastic necklace from Walmart with a price tag of $12 still on it. It was gaudy and scratched. I left it in New York. I lied. It didn't go with the outfit. It didn't go with the outfit, she mocked, her voice pitching higher. It was the only thing that could have saved this outfit. I bought that for you because you need sparkle, Amara. You are so plain. Jasmine shines naturally. She lights up a room. But you absorb light. You need all the help you can get. I wanted you to look like you belong to this family for once instead of some charity case we let in the back door. The words were not new. I had heard variations of them my entire life. Why can't you be more charismatic like Jasmine? Why are you so serious? Why is your hair so natural? Why don't you marry a nice man so you can stop working so hard? But hearing them today, after I had just signed the wire transfer that saved this family from public humiliation, made the bile rise in my throat. I am sorry I embarrass you, Mom, I said, my voice flat. But I am here. I am present. Isn't that enough? Not when you look like the help, she said, smoothing her own silk gown. Just stay in the shadows, Amara. Do not get in the photographer's way. He charges by the hour, and I do not want to pay to Photoshop you out of the background. She turned to leave but then stopped and looked back at me one last time. And fix your face, she added. You look like you are judging us. You have no right to judge. You have never contributed a dime to this family's legacy. She walked away, disappearing back into the glittering crowd, instantly transforming back into the gracious hostess. I stood there alone by the bathroom doors, feeling the familiar sting of tears pricking my eyes. But I refused to let them fall. Not here, not today. I took a moment to compose myself and then stepped back out. I needed a drink. I made my way toward the open bar, weaving through clusters of guests. That was when I saw them. My relatives. Aunt Sheila and Uncle Marcus were standing near a towering ice sculpture of a swan. Aunt Sheila was my mother's sister, a woman who claimed to be a devout Christian but had a tongue sharper than a serpent's tooth. Uncle Marcus was a man who had tried 20 different get-rich-quick schemes and failed at every single one of them. 2 years ago, Uncle Marcus had called me crying. He needed $5,000 to start a trucking company. He swore he would pay me back in 3 months with interest. I had wired him the money from my personal account, not my business one, because I knew he would never qualify for a real loan. I never saw a dime of it back. The trucking company never happened. But looking at him now, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost $1,000 to rent, holding a glass of 20-year-old scotch, I realized where my money had gone. I walked past them hoping to go unnoticed, but Aunt Sheila's radar for drama was impeccable. Well, well, she said, her voice carrying over the string quartet. Look who finally decided to show up. We were just taking bets on whether you could afford the plane ticket, Amara. Uncle Marcus laughed, the sound wet and heavy. Now Sheila be nice. Maybe she hitched a ride. They both chuckled, clinking their glasses together. I stopped and turned to face them. Hello, Aunt Sheila. Uncle Marcus, I said politely. The trucking business must be doing well, Marcus. I haven't heard from you about that repayment plan we discussed. The smile slid off Uncle Marcus's face for a second, replaced by a flash of annoyance. He took a large gulp of his scotch. Don't talk business at a wedding, Amara, he grunted. It's tacky. Besides, family helps family. You shouldn't hold grudges over pocket change. It's unbecoming. Pocket change. $5,000 was pocket change to the man who had $0 in his savings account. That's the problem with you, Amara, Aunt Sheila chimed in, leaning forward so her oversized hat dipped precariously. You are so transactional. You count every penny. That's why you are still single. Men don't like a woman who is so stingy. Look at Jasmine. She is generous with her spirit. That is why she landed a sterling. Well, a sterling by marriage soon. I looked at the diamond bracelet on Aunt Sheila's wrist. It was fake. I could tell by the way it didn't refract the light properly. Everything about them was fake. The smiles, the wealth, the piety. I will keep that in mind, Auntie, I said. Enjoy the Scotch, Uncle Marcus. It is top shelf. I walked away before I said something I would regret, or rather something that would reveal my hand too early. As I moved through the crowd, I heard the whispers trailing behind me like smoke. That is the older sister, the one who lives in a studio apartment in New York. I heard she works as a secretary. Such a shame. Vivian and Lawrence are so successful. Every family has a black sheep, I suppose. At least Jasmine made up for it. The words washed over me. The disappointment, the failure, the ugly duckling. I walked to the far side of the room near the kitchen doors where the staff were rushing in and out with trays of hors d'oeuvres. This was my designated spot. Table 19, the table furthest from the head table, furthest from the cameras, and right next to the noise of the crashing dishes in the kitchen. I sat down. The chair was wobbly. I looked at the name card at my place setting. It didn't even say my name correctly. It was spelled Amara with an H at the end. My own mother hadn't bothered to check the spelling of her daughter's name with the wedding planner. I picked up the heavy linen napkin and placed it on my lap. I looked across the room at the head table, which was raised on a platform like a throne. My parents were there laughing. Jasmine was there glowing in her dress that cost more than most people earned in a year. They were celebrating their triumph. They were celebrating their ascent into the highest echelons of society. They thought they were the kings and queens of this castle. I picked up a silver fork and turned it over in my hand, feeling the weight of it. They didn't know that the castle was built on sand. And I was the tide coming in. Just then, a waiter stopped by my table to refill water glasses. He looked exhausted. He was young, maybe 22, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead. "Rough night?" I asked him quietly. He jumped a little, surprised that a guest was speaking to him. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. "We are short-staffed, and the management, well, paychecks bounced last week. We are all just hoping the tips tonight are cash." I looked at him, and for the first time since I arrived, I smiled. A real smile. "Don't worry about the tips," I told him. "Do a good job tonight. Things are about to change around here." He looked confused, but he nodded and scurried away. I sat back and watched the room. Let them have their appetizers. Let them mock my clothes and my car and my life. Let them enjoy the flowers I paid for and the wine I owned. The bill was coming due. And unlike Uncle Marcus, I collected my debts. Across the room, I saw the double doors open again. The energy in the room shifted. The volume went up. It was the arrival of the groom's family, the Hunters. And leading the pack was Hunter's mother, a woman who looked at my family not as in-laws, but as an interesting anthropology experiment. She made a beeline for my mother. I watched as they greeted each other. My mother did a little curtsy, a gesture so subservient it made my stomach turn. Hunter's mother said something and gestured in my direction. My mother laughed nervously and waved a hand as if swatting away a fly. I knew exactly what they were saying. They were apologizing for me. I took a sip of water. It tasted like metal. Let the games begin. I sat at table 19. The table for the outcasts and the invisible, listening to the waiter apologize for the delay in service. His name tag read David, and he looked terrified. I had asked him a simple question about the payroll schedule, because I knew from my due diligence that the previous owners of the Preston Hills Country Club had been skimming from the tip pool. I wanted to know if he had been paid for last month. David lowered his voice, glancing nervously toward the kitchen doors. "No, ma'am," he whispered. "They said the checks are in the mail, but it has been 3 weeks. My rent is due on Tuesday. I don't know what I'm going to do." I nodded slowly, my heart breaking for him. This was the reality behind the glitz and glamour. While my parents burned money on imported roses, the people serving them were risking eviction. "Don't worry, David," I told him, keeping my voice steady and authoritative. "I want you to write down the names of every staff member working tonight and the hours they are owed. Can you do that for me?" He looked confused, but he nodded. Just then, a hush fell over the room, followed immediately by a ripple of excited applause. The double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open, and there she was, Jasmine. My sister entered the room not like a bride-to-be, but like a conquering empress returning from war. She was flanked by 6 bridesmaids, all wearing identical champagne-colored gowns that looked expensive but uncomfortable. But Jasmine was the sun around which they all orbited. She was wearing a custom Vera Wang gown that I knew cost more than my first car. It was a masterpiece of lace and silk, fitted perfectly to her body, with a train that swept across the floor like a royal decree. Her hair was piled high on her head, adorned with a tiara that sparkled under the lights. She was beautiful. I could not deny that. She had the kind of beauty that demanded attention, that sucked the air out of the room. She was smiling, waving to the guests, blowing kisses to the senators and the bankers. She was playing the role of the perfect debutante, the crown jewel of the Sterling family. As she moved through the room, stopping to accept compliments and show off the 10-carat diamond on her finger, she scanned the crowd. Her eyes were sharp, predatory. She was looking for flaws. She was looking for anything that might detract from her moment. And then her eyes landed on me. I was sitting in the shadows near the kitchen door talking to David. To anyone else it looked like a guest having a polite conversation with a server. But to Jasmine it looked like an opportunity. She changed course immediately. She broke away from her entourage and headed straight for my table. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed. She glided across the floor, holding a glass of dark red wine in one hand. As she approached, the guests nearby fell silent, sensing the tension. They turned to watch the spectacle. The golden child descending from her throne to address the peasant. "Amara," she said, her voice loud enough to carry to the neighboring tables. "I didn't think you would actually come inside. Daddy said he gave you money for a cab." I stood up. I wasn't going to let her look down on me while I was sitting. "I am here to support you, Jasmine," I said calmly. "Congratulations." She ignored my words. She looked at David, who was freezing up beside me, and then she looked back at me with a sneer of disgust. "Support me," she scoffed. "By harassing the help. What are you doing?" "Amara, begging for extra bread rolls, asking if you can take a doggy bag home for dinner tomorrow." David's face flushed red. "Miss Sterling," he started to say, defending me, but I silenced him with a gentle hand on his arm. "I was just asking him about his shift, Jasmine," I said. "Not everything is about handouts." She laughed, a cruel tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, please, Amara, everything with you is about handouts. You show up here in those rags driving that junk car, and you expect us to believe you are just a normal guest. You are embarrassing me. Look at you. You look like you are going to a funeral." She stepped closer, invading my personal space. The smell of her expensive perfume was suffocating. She swirled the wine in her glass. "This is a celebration, Amara," she hissed, lowering her voice just a fraction. "Successful people only. You are ruining the aesthetic. Why don't you go wait in the kitchen? I am sure they have some leftovers you can scrape into a container." I looked her in the eye. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I thought about the deed to the building sitting in my email inbox. I thought about the fact that technically she was standing on my floor, shouting at my employee. "I am fine right here, Jasmine," I said, my voice cold steel. The defiance in my eyes triggered something in her. She wasn't used to me fighting back. She was used to me shrinking, apologizing, fading away. She didn't like this new Amara. She wanted to put me back in my place. She took a step back, her eyes flashing with malice. And then with a motion that was so fluid, it almost looked accidental, she stumbled. But it wasn't a stumble. It was a calculated pirouette. As she feigned a loss of balance, her arms swung out. The contents of her wine glass, a deep, rich Cabernet, splashed across the air in a perfect arc. It hit me square in the chest. The cold liquid soaked instantly into my white silk blouse underneath my blazer, splashing up onto my neck and chin. The red stain bloomed rapidly, spreading like a gunshot wound across my chest. I gasped, the shock of the cold liquid making me flinch. The glass fell from Jasmine's hand and shattered on the floor, 1,000 crystal shards exploding around our feet. The entire ballroom went silent. The music stopped. Every head turned. For a second, nobody moved. I stood there dripping wine, the dark liquid ruining a $300 blouse and staining the lapel of my $3,000 blazer. I felt the sticky wetness seeping through to my skin. Then the chaos started. But not for me. "Oh my God!" Jasmine shrieked, throwing her hands up to her face in a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "My dress is my dress, okay?" Did it get on me? Immediately, her bridesmaids and my mother descended on her like a flock of anxious birds. They fluttered around her, checking the hem of her Vera Wang gown, lifting the fabric, scanning for even a microscopic drop of red wine. "It is fine, Jasmine. It missed you." "Thank God," one bridesmaid cried out. My mother. Vivian rushed over, glaring at me as if I had been the one who threw the wine. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer me a napkin. She turned her back on me and hugged Jasmine. "You poor thing," my mother cooed. "You must be so shaken." "It was an accident, baby. Just an accident." Jasmine pulled away from our mother and looked at me. The fake panic was gone, replaced by a look of pure triumphant venom. She looked at the red stain on my chest and smiled a small, cruel smile that only I could see. Then she raised her voice again for the benefit of the audience. "Trudy." "Lord Amara," she yelled, exasperated. "How can you be so clumsy? You walked right into me. Look what you did. You almost ruined a $20,000 dress." I stood my ground, wiping a drop of wine from my chin. "I didn't walk into you, Jasmine," I said quietly but firmly. "You threw it." The crowd gasped at my accusation. I heard whispers of, "How rude," and "She is drunk." "Excuse me?" Jasmine laughed incredulously, playing to the crowd. "Why would I waste a glass of vintage wine on you?" "You really are delusional." She looked me up and down, her face twisting into a mask of revulsion. "Look at yourself, Amara. You look disgusting. You are dripping wet. You smell like a winery." She reached out and flicked a wet spot on my blazer with her manicured nail. "Where did you get this outfit anyway?" she asked, loud enough for the Hunter family to hear across the room. "Goodwill. The Salvation Army bin. I bet it smells like mothballs and poor people." Laughter rippled through the room. My cheeks burned, not with shame but with fury. "Go clean yourself up," Jasmine commanded, pointing toward the restrooms. "You are making a mess on the floor, and use the staff bathroom in the back. I don't want you dripping cheap wine all over the guest facilities." She turned her back on me, dismissing me like a naughty child. "Come on, girls," she said to her bridesmaids. "Let's get away from the smell." As she walked away, her train sweeping over the shards of broken glass, I saw my father watching from the bar. He didn't look angry at Jasmine. He looked annoyed at me. He mouthed the words, "Go fix it." I looked down at David, the waiter. He had tears in his eyes. "I am so sorry, ma'am," he whispered, handing me a cloth napkin from his tray. I saw her. She did it on purpose. I took the napkin and pressed it against my chest, absorbing the wine. "It is okay, David," I said, my voice calm, strangely calm. I watched Jasmine laughing with her friends, recounting the story of how her clumsy sister almost ruined her day. She thought she had won. She thought she had humiliated me. She thought she had put the beggar back in her place. She didn't know that the beggar was about to become the executioner. I turned and walked toward the stage, not toward the bathroom. I wasn't going to clean up. I was going to wear this stain like war paint. It was time to introduce myself. I pushed through the heavy mahogany doors of the ladies' lounge, and the silence enveloped me. The throbbing bass of the reception music was instantly cut off, replaced by the soft hum of classical music piping through invisible speakers. The restrooms at Preston Hills were nicer than my first apartment. The countertops were imported marble, the soap was Aesop, and the lighting was designed to make everyone look 10 years younger. But even the best lighting could not hide the disaster on my chest. I stood in front of the gold-framed mirror, gripping the edges of the sink until my knuckles turned white. The red wine stain had bloomed across my white silk blouse like a gruesome wound. It was dark, sticky, and smelled of fermentation. I grabbed a stack of plush hand towels and ran them under the cold water, dabbing frantically at the fabric. But I knew it was futile. Silk does not forgive, and neither does red wine. The blouse was ruined. Just as I was about to give up and accept my fate, I heard the main door open. Voices drifted in, accompanied by the click-clack of high heels on the marble floor. I froze. I recognized those voices immediately. It was Tiffany and Chloe, Jasmine's bridesmaids. Her best friends since college. The girls who had just been fawning over her dress and holding her train. I instinctively stepped into the handicap stall and locked the door quietly. I did not want to face them. I did not want their pity or their sneers. "Did you see her face?" Chloe giggled, the sound echoing off the tile. "Jasmine is a savage. I thought she was going to slap her sister, but the wine toss was iconic." "She deserved it," Tiffany replied. "Who wears pants to a black tie wedding? It is disrespectful." But honestly, Jasmine is on edge today. I have never seen her this stressed. "You would be stressed too if your credit card got declined at the salon this morning," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I stopped breathing. I pressed my ear against the cold metal of the stall divider. "What do you mean?" declined Tiffany asked. "I mean maxed out," Chloe said. "I was with her when she went to pay for the hair and makeup trial. She had to use 3 different cards and then call her dad to transfer money just to cover the tip. This whole wedding. It is a house of cards, girl. They are broke." "No way." Tiffany gasped. "The Sterlings. They have money. Look at this venue. It is all a show." Chloe scoffed. "My mom knows their banker. She said Lawrence Sterling is leveraged up to his eyeballs. They have second mortgages on everything. Why do you think Jasmine was so desperate to lock down Hunter? She is not marrying for love, honey. She is marrying a bailout. If this wedding didn't happen today, the Sterlings would be filing for bankruptcy by Monday." I stood there in the dark stall, my heart pounding against my ribs. I knew my family was bad with money, but I didn't realize it was this dire. They were not just living beyond their means, they were drowning. And Jasmine knew. My parents knew. This entire wedding was a financial transaction, a merger disguised as a romance designed to save them from their own greed. And they had treated me, the only person who actually had liquid capital, like a leper. "We better get back out there," Chloe said, the sound of lipstick being applied accompanying her words. "If Jasmine needs to use the bathroom and we are not there to hold her dress, she will have a meltdown. And I want to be close to the open bar when the ship goes down." They laughed cruel, hollow laughs and exited the restroom, leaving me alone with the truth. I waited a full minute before I unlocked the stall door. I looked at myself in the mirror again. The wine stain was still there, a mark of shame. But now it felt different. It wasn't just a stain. It was a badge of honor. I wasn't the one pretending. I wasn't the one living a lie. I was the only real thing in this entire building. I squared my shoulders, adjusted my ruined blazer, and walked back out into the lion's den. The ballroom was in full swing now. Waiters were serving the first course, a lobster bisque that cost $20 a bowl. I scanned the room looking for a place to land. I saw empty seats at tables with my cousins and aunts, but as I approached, eyes averted. Purses were placed on empty chairs, shoulders were turned. The message was clear. You cannot sit here. Finally, I saw it. My destination. The hostess, a young woman who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else, pointed a manicured finger toward the far corner of the room. "You are at table 19, Miss Sterling," she said without making eye contact. "Table 19, of course." I walked past the head table where Jasmine was feeding Hunter a spoonful of soup for the cameras. I walked past the VIP tables where the senators and bishops sat. I walked all the way to the back of the room right next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen. Table 19 was smaller than the others. The centerpiece was noticeably sparse, just a few carnations instead of roses. And my dinner companions were not family. To my left sat the wedding photographer who was frantically backing up photos on his laptop while shoving bread rolls into his mouth. To my right was the makeup artist scrolling through Instagram looking bored out of her mind. This was the vendor table. The table for the hired help. I pulled out my chair, which wobbled on the uneven floor, and sat down. The photographer looked up, crumbs on his lip. "Rough night, huh?" he said, gesturing to my shirt with a breadstick. "You have no idea," I muttered, unfolding my napkin to cover the stain. "Family?" he asked. "Something like that," I replied. The kitchen doors swung open next to us with a loud crash, and a gust of hot air smelling of garlic and dish soap hit me in the face. A waiter rushed out, nearly tripping over my chair. I shifted my legs, trying to make myself smaller, trying to disappear. But disappearance was not an option, not when the Queen Mother was on patrol. I saw them coming from a mile away. My mother, Vivian, was walking arm in arm with Mrs. Eleanor Hunter, the groom's mother. Eleanor was a woman who wore her wealth like armor. She was light-skinned with chemically straightened hair that did not move, and she wore a diamond necklace that was probably an heirloom from a time when her ancestors owned people who looked like me. They were doing the rounds, greeting the guests. I prayed they would skip the vendor table. Why would they come back here? There was nobody important to impress, but Eleanor Hunter was a predator, and predators like to inspect every inch of their territory. She stopped right in front of table 19, her cold gray eyes landing on me. She didn't look at the photographer or the makeup artist. She looked only at me. She tilted her head to the side, examining me like I was a specimen in a jar that had been mislabeled. "Vivian," she said, her voice perfectly modulated and utterly devoid of warmth. "Is this the other one? The one you told me about?" My mother froze. I could see the panic in her eyes. She looked from me to Eleanor, terrified that I would say something to embarrass her. "Yes, Eleanor," my mother said, her laugh nervous and brittle. "This is Amara, my eldest." Eleanor took a step closer, sniffing the air. She smelled the wine on me. Her nose wrinkled slightly. "I see," she said. "She certainly is. Different from Jasmine, isn't she? Darker. Much darker. And that bone structure. It is very primal." The insult hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was a colorist microaggression so sharp it could cut glass. She was calling me ugly. She was calling me lesser. She was calling me a throwback to a past she wanted to forget. I gripped the edge of the table, ready to speak, ready to defend myself. But my mother beat me to it, and what she said broke my heart more than any wine stain ever could. "Oh yes," Vivian agreed quickly, eager to please the woman whose son was their financial lifeline. "We have always said Amara must have inherited the recessive genes from her great-grandfather. You know how genetics can be. Sometimes they skip a generation, and you end up with a surprise." She laughed again, inviting Eleanor to join in. "We have tried to help her, of course." Vivian continued, warming to her theme now that she saw Eleanor nodding. "We sent her to charm school. We bought her nice clothes. But some people just are not built for refinement. Amara is a bit slow. She prefers the simple life. She works in data entry, you know. Very repetitive work. It suits her." I sat there frozen. My own mother was calling me slow. She was calling me simple. She was erasing my MBA from Wharton. She was erasing my portfolio worth millions. She was erasing my entire identity just to suck up to a woman who looked at us like we were zoo animals. Eleanor nodded, looking at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Well, it is good that she has found her level," Eleanor said. "The world needs people to do the menial tasks, I suppose. Not everyone can be a leader. Not everyone can be a Sterling or a Hunter." She turned her back on me, dismissing me completely. "Come," Vivian Eleanor said. "The senator wants to make a toast. We shouldn't keep him waiting." My mother cast one last look at me. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. "Stay here. Be quiet. Don't ruin this." They walked away, their laughter blending with the clinking of crystal glasses. I sat alone at table 19. The photographer looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. He had heard everything. "Wow," he whispered. "That was harsh." I picked up my water glass. My hand was steady now. The trembling had stopped. The sadness had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They thought I was slow. They thought I was simple. They thought I was a recessive gene, a mistake, a worker bee. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I saw the notification I had been waiting for. The transfer of ownership for the Preston Hills Country Club was officially recorded in the county database. The email from my lawyer had just come through confirming that the debt acquisition of the Sterling Family Trust, which included my parents' house, was also complete. I looked at the photographer and smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Don't worry about it," I told him. "They think the world needs people to do menial tasks." But they forgot one thing. "What is that?" he asked, leaning in. "Someone has to sign the paychecks," I said. I put my phone down on the table. The screen lit up with the time. It was almost time for the speeches. It was almost time for the truth. I picked up my spoon and took a sip of the lobster bisque. It was cold, just like revenge. The lobster bisque arrived at table 19, lukewarm and sloshing against the rim of the bowl, as the waiter set it down. He looked apologetic, but I barely noticed him. My eyes were fixed on the head table across the room. It was raised on a platform draped in gold cloth and illuminated by spotlights. My parents sat there like royalty, flanking Jasmine and Hunter. They were laughing, toasting with crystal flutes, and basking in the admiration of the room. They looked perfect. They looked wealthy. They looked like a family that did not have a care in the world. But I knew the truth. I knew that the champagne they were drinking was charged to a credit card that was 2 months overdue. I knew that the spotlight they were sitting under was powered by electricity that was about to be cut off. And I knew that the $50,000 I had transferred to my father's account 18 months ago, the money I had scraped together from my first bonuses and side hustles, was the only reason they were sitting there at all. I looked down at my phone. My lawyer had sent the confirmation. The foreclosure on my parents' house was active. The purchase of the country club debt was finalized. I held the keys to their kingdom and the match to burn it down. But there was one last thing I needed to hear. One last confirmation of exactly who they were. I pushed my chair back. It scraped loudly against the floor, startling the photographer next to me. "Where are you going?" he whispered, his mouth full of bread. "To get what is mine," I said. I stood up. I smoothed down my blazer, which was still damp and sticky with red wine. The stain was drying into a dark, ugly purple map of my sister's cruelty. I did not try to hide it. I wanted them to see it. I wanted the Hunters to see it. I began the long walk across the ballroom. The distance between table 19 and the head table felt like a mile. As I walked, the conversations around me died down. Heads turned. People whispered. They saw the stain. They saw the set of my jaw. They saw the woman who had been banished to the vendor table marching toward the throne. I kept my eyes locked on my father. Lawrence Sterling. He was in the middle of telling a story, using his hands for emphasis, making the table laugh. He looked confident. He looked untouchable. When he saw me approaching, his smile faltered. He elbowed my mother. She looked up and her face went pale. They exchanged a look of pure panic. They thought I was coming to make a scene about the wine. They thought I was coming to cry or scream or embarrass them. I walked right up to the edge of the platform. I did not climb the stairs. I stood below them looking up. It was a fitting visual metaphor. The beggar at the feet of the king. Lawrence leaned over the edge of the table, his voice a low hiss masked by a tight smile. "Go sit down, Amara," he said through gritted teeth. You are making a spectacle of yourself. I did not move. I did not lower my voice to a whisper, but I kept it controlled, calm, and deadly serious. We need to talk, Dad, I said. Not now. He snapped, glancing nervously at the Hunter family who were watching with rapt attention. We are in the middle of the first course. Go back to your table. We will talk tomorrow. We will talk now, I said, my voice cutting through the ambient noise of the room. I want to know about my money. My mother. Vivian leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. Amara, please, she hissed. Do not do this here. The $50,000, Mom. I continued, ignoring her plea. The money I sent you last year. The money for the down payment on my house. You said you were keeping it in a high-yield savings account for me because you knew a broker. You said it would be safe. You said I could withdraw it whenever I found a property. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I found a property, I lied. I need the transfer to happen this week, Monday morning. Lawrence laughed. It was a nervous sound, a dry bark that fooled no one. He took a sip of his wine, trying to buy time. He looked at Hunter's father, the senator, and gave a little shrug as if to say, "Kid's right." Then he looked back at me. His eyes were cold, hard flint. "You cannot have it," he said simply. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. I had expected excuses. I had expected delays. I did not expect a flat refusal. "What do you mean I cannot have it?" I asked. "It is my money. I earned it. I trusted you with it." Lawrence put his wineglass down. He leaned further over the table, invading my space, trying to intimidate me with his proximity. "It is gone, Amara," he said, his voice dropping so low that only I and the people at the head table could hear. "Gone," I repeated. "Spent," he clarified. I stared at him. I stared at the man who had lectured me about fiscal responsibility my entire life. The man who had grounded me for losing a $5 bill when I was 10, spent on what I asked, my voice trembling with rage. Lawrence sighed as if explaining simple addition to a slow child. He gestured around the room. He gestured at the crystal chandeliers, the velvet drapes, the thousands of white roses. "Look around you, Amara," he said. "Do you think this comes free? Do you think the Preston Hills Country Club accepts IOUs? We had to put a deposit down, $20,000 just to reserve the date. And then there was the catering. And the band." "You spent my house fund on a party?" I asked incredulously. "It is not just a party," Lawrence snapped, losing his composure for a second. "It is an investment. Jasmine is marrying a hunter. Do you understand what that means for this family? It means connections. It means access. It means survival." He looked at me with genuine disdain, as if I were the selfish one for wanting my own money back. "And the rest?" I asked. "That was only $20,000. Where is the other $30,000, Dad?" Lawrence looked at Jasmine. She was busy pretending to adjust her napkin, refusing to look at me. She knew. She had known all along. "We gave it to Jasmine," he said. "You gave it to her," I whispered. "As a wedding gift," he said, keeping his voice steady. "A dowry of sorts. The Hunters expect a certain level of wealth, Amara. We could not send her into that marriage empty-handed. We bought her a new car, a Mercedes, and we put the rest in an account for her so she would have her own spending money." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I drove a 10-year-old Honda. I lived in a modest apartment. I saved every penny. And they had taken my hard-earned savings and given it to the sister who had just thrown wine on me so she could drive a Mercedes. "You stole from me," I said. "You stole $50,000 from your own daughter to buy luxury goods for your other daughter." Lawrence slammed his hand down on the table. The cutlery rattled. "Watch your mouth, Amara," he hissed. "It is not stealing. It is family money. We are a family. We help each other. You are the older sister. You are supposed to sacrifice. You have a job. You have no husband, no kids, no responsibilities. You can earn it back. It is just money. Just money." To him, $50,000 was just a tool to maintain an illusion. To me, it was 3 years of 60-hour weeks. It was missed holidays. It was skipped meals. It was my freedom. So let me get this straight, I said, speaking slowly so there could be no misunderstanding. You took my money because you think I don't need it. You think because I am single and I work hard, I exist solely to subsidize Jasmine's lifestyle. Lawrence rolled his eyes. Stop being so dramatic. You are making a scene. We will pay you back eventually, when the business picks up. When Hunter's father gets me that contract with the city, you will get your little money back. Now go sit down before I have security remove you. He picked up his knife and fork, dismissing me. He went back to cutting his filet mignon, as if he hadn't just admitted to grand larceny. My mother looked at me. There was no apology in her eyes, only annoyance. Amara, please, she whispered. Don't be selfish. Not today. Selfish. The word echoed in my head. They called me selfish for wanting the fruit of my own labor. They called me selfish for not wanting to be robbed. I looked at the hunters. They were watching us with polite curiosity, pretending not to hear but listening to every word. Hunter was smirking. He enjoyed seeing me beg. I looked back at my father. He was chewing his steak, confident that he had won. Confident that I would do what I always did. Swallow the hurt. Go back to the shadows. Accept my role as the scapegoat. But he was wrong. Okay, Dad, I said, my voice eerily calm. I just wanted to be clear. I turned around. I didn't go back to table 19. I walked toward the stage where the band was setting up. Lawrence thought the conversation was over. He thought he had silenced me. He didn't know that by admitting he spent the money, he had just given me the moral license to do what I was about to do. He didn't just steal my money. He stole my mercy. And now I was going to take everything he had left. I stood there on the steps of the dais looking down at my father, and for a moment the sheer audacity of his admission left me breathless. He had just confessed to stealing $50,000 from me, as if he had simply borrowed a 20 from my purse for pizza. He picked up his wineglass again, swirling the expensive liquid, his eyes daring me to make a scene. He thought that was it. He thought the conversation was over. He thought he could bully me into silence with the weight of family obligation, just like he had done for 32 years. But I was not the same Amara who used to cry in her bedroom because her parents forgot her birthday. I was a shark. And when a shark smells blood, it does not swim away. It attacks. I let out a laugh. It was a dry, hollow sound that seemed to suck the warmth out of the air between us. Lawrence frowned, setting his glass down. What is so funny, Amara? He asked, his voice tight with irritation. You are Dad, I said, shaking my head. You really think that 50,000 is the issue here? You think that is the big number? I took a step closer, invading the personal bubble of the head table. I placed my hands on the pristine white tablecloth, leaning in until I was face to face with my mother. Vivian looked terrified. She knew what was coming. She had always been the mastermind, the accountant of their deception, while my father was merely the face of it. Let's talk about the Department of Education, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. Let's talk about the letter I received last week, the one regarding the $120,000 in student loans. The color drained from my mother's face so fast she looked like she might faint. She reached out and gripped my father's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his velvet tuxedo jacket. Amara, not here, she pleaded, her eyes darting toward the Hunter family who were watching this exchange, with the fascination of people watching a car crash. Oh yes, here, Mom, I said. Especially here. Because I was confused when I got that letter. You see, I went to a state university on a full academic scholarship. I graduated debt-free. I have never taken out a loan in my life. So imagine my surprise when I found out that I apparently attended the Parsons School of Design for 4 years. Or rather, my social security number did. Jasmine, who had been busy pretending to examine her engagement ring, suddenly froze. She stopped breathing. I looked at my sister, the golden child, the art major who had never sold a painting in her life. You forged my signature, didn't you? I asked. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. My father opened his mouth to bluster, to deny, to shout me down, but my mother cut him off. She realized that denial was futile. The evidence was on paper. So she switched tactics. She switched to the most dangerous weapon in her arsenal: gaslighting. Vivian straightened her spine, adjusting the diamond necklace that probably cost more than my first car. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and condescension, as if I were a child who simply didn't understand how the world worked. "Amara, listen to me," she said, her voice taking on that reasonable maternal tone that made my skin crawl. "It is not what you think. We didn't do it to hurt you. We did it for the family." "For the family," I repeated, feeling the bile rise in my throat. "You committed a federal crime for the family." "Stop using those words," Vivian hissed. "It wasn't a crime. It was a strategy. Jasmine needed to go to that school. You know she has a gift, Amara. She is an artist. She is a creative soul. She couldn't go to some state school in the middle of nowhere like you did. She needed to be in New York. She needed to be where the culture is." I stared at her. Jasmine's gift was shopping and taking selfies. Her art was a joke. She needed a degree in fashion marketing, I asked. "A degree she never uses." "That degree put her in the room, Amara," my mother insisted, her eyes wide with conviction. "That school is where the daughters of diplomats and oil tycoons go. That is where the European royalty sends their children. We needed Jasmine in that ecosystem." "How do you think she met Hunter? Do you think she would have met a senator's son at a community college?" I looked at Hunter. He was smirking slightly, seemingly amused that his pedigree was being discussed like a commodity. "So you stole my identity to pay for a hunting license," I said flatly. "You saddled me with 6 figures of debt so Jasmine could go catch a rich husband." Vivian sighed, rolling her eyes as if I were being intentionally dense. "It was an investment, Amara. And look, it paid off. She is marrying a hunter. Do you know what that means for us? It means security. It means access. Once they are married, Jasmine will have access to the Sterling Trust. She will pay you back. She will pay it all back double." "You don't get it, Mom," I said, my voice trembling, not with sadness but with pure, unadulterated rage. "You didn't just borrow money. You used my name. You used my credit history. I have an 800 credit score because I worked for it. Jasmine has a credit score of 0 because you raised her to be useless. And you decided that my hard work was just another asset for you to liquidate." My father finally found his voice. He realized that the hunters were listening too closely, and he needed to regain control of the narrative. "You are being selfish, Amara," he growled, pointing a finger at me. "You have a good job. You make plenty of money in that city doing whatever it is you do. You can afford the monthly payments until your sister gets settled. Why do you have to be so stingy? Why do you have to count every penny? It is ugly, Amara. It makes you look bitter. Bitter. They stole my past. They stole my future. And they called me bitter for noticing." I looked at them. I looked at Lawrence and Vivian Sterling. For 32 years I had looked at them with a desperate longing, hoping they would finally see me, finally love me. I had tried to be the perfect daughter. I had gotten the grades. I had built the career. I had bailed them out over and over again. But in that moment, standing under the hot glare of the spotlights, the veil finally lifted. I didn't see my parents anymore. I didn't see a mother and a father who were just flawed or misguided. I saw criminals. I saw 2 con artists in expensive clothes who had groomed one daughter to be a parasite and the other to be the host. They didn't love Jasmine either, not really. She was just their show pony, their ticket to the big leagues. And I was the draft horse they whipped until I collapsed. But the horse was done pulling the cart. I looked at Jasmine. She was refusing to make eye contact, staring intently at her manicure. She knew. She had signed those papers too. She had walked across a graduation stage and accepted a diploma that I paid for with my identity. "You knew," I said to her softly. Jasmine shrugged one shoulder, a gesture of petulant indifference. "Mom said it was fine," she muttered. "She said you wouldn't mind because you are family. And honestly, Amara, why do you care? You don't have a husband. You don't have kids. What else are you going to spend your money on?" The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was so casual, so matter of fact. In their minds, my life had no value other than what I could provide for them. I was not a person. I was a resource. I looked back at my mother. She was smiling again, that tight, fake smile, thinking she had won the argument. "See, Amara," she said. "It is all handled. We will set up a payment plan once the wedding is over. Now please go back to your table. You are upsetting the bride." I looked at the pen lying on the table next to the guest book. It was a gold-plated Mont Blanc pen. Heavy, expensive. "Payment plan," I said. "Yes," Vivian said, waving her hand dismissively. "We will talk about it next week." I realized then that they truly believed this. They truly believed that they could commit a felony against me and I would just take it. They believed that I was so desperate for their crumbs of affection that I would swallow this poison and say thank you. But they didn't know about the email in my pocket. They didn't know that the data entry girl they mocked was actually a vulture capitalist. They didn't know that while they were playing checkers with borrowed money, I had been playing three-dimensional chess with their lives. "You are right, Mom," I said. "A payment plan is a good idea. But I think we need to settle the accounts now." I reached into my blazer pocket. My hand brushed against the cold metal of my phone. "I am not going back to my table," I said. Lawrence glared at me. "If you do not sit down, I will have you thrown out." "You can try," I said. "But I don't think the security guards take orders from guests." "Guests," he sputtered. "I am the father of the bride. I am the host." "No, Dad." I said, a strange calm settling over me. "You are not." I turned my back on them. I walked toward the center of the stage, toward the microphone stand that was set up for the best man's speech. The room went silent. The band stopped playing. The waiters stopped serving. 200 pairs of eyes locked onto me. I saw the panic rise in my parents' eyes. They started to stand up. "Sit down," I commanded, my voice projecting without the microphone. And for the first time in their lives, they listened. They sat. I reached the microphone. I adjusted the height. I tapped it twice. The sound boomed through the ballroom, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. It was time to testify. The silence in the ballroom was thick enough to choke on. I stood at the microphone stand, my hand hovering over the metal grill, ready to unleash a lifetime of suppressed truth. But before I could speak a single word, movement caught my eye at the head table. Jasmine had stopped crying. The tears that had been flowing so freely just moments ago dried up, instantly replaced by a look of calculated panic. She knew what I was capable of. She knew that if I opened my mouth, their house of cards would not just fall, it would incinerate. She did not scream at me this time. Instead, she made a subtle gesture, a quick, desperate wave to the side of the stage. Hunter saw it. The groom, the man of the hour. He rose from his seat with the grace of a jungle cat moving toward its prey. He adjusted his silk tie, buttoned his tuxedo jacket, and walked toward me. But he did not come alone. Following close behind him was a man I recognized instantly. Mr. Sterling Blackwood, the Hunter family's personal attorney. A man whose billable hour cost more than my father made in a week. They flanked me, cutting off my path to the microphone. Hunter placed a hand on my shoulder. To the audience, it looked like a brotherly gesture, a groom comforting his distressed sister-in-law. But up close, his grip was like a vice, his fingers digging into my clavicle with bruising force. "Step away from the mic, Amara," he whispered, his voice smooth and cold as liquid nitrogen. "We are going to have a little chat." He steered me forcefully away from center stage, dragging me down the steps to a semi-private area near the DJ booth where the shadows were deepest. My parents scrambled down from the head table, rushing to join us like obedient lapdogs. Hunter released me, pushing me slightly so my back hit the wall. He towered over me. He was undeniably handsome with his square jaw and blue eyes, but in that moment, he looked hideous. His eyes held no warmth, only contempt. He looked at me the way one looks at a cockroach that has scurried across a pristine kitchen floor. "You are causing a scene, Amara," he said quietly. "My family does not do scenes. We do not do drama." And we certainly do not do hysterical women screaming about money at a wedding. I am not hysterical, Hunter, I said, brushing off my shoulder where he had grabbed me. I am the only person here who is doing the math. Hunter laughed a short, sharp sound. Math, he scoffed. Is that what you call it? Your parents told me about you, Amara. They told me you have always been jealous of Jasmine. They told me you have always been the greedy one, the one who keeps score. It is sad, really. Jasmine is shining today and you just cannot stand it, can you? You have to try and tarnish her gold to make yourself feel better. I looked at my parents. Lawrence and Vivian stood behind Hunter, nodding their heads in agreement. My father refused to meet my eyes, but my mother looked at me with a pleading expression that made my stomach turn. She wanted me to accept this narrative. She wanted me to be the villain so they could be the victims. Hunter snapped his fingers. Mr. Blackwood, the lawyer, stepped forward, placing a leather briefcase on a small cocktail table. He opened it with a decisive click and pulled out a document. It was thick bound on heavy resume paper. What is this? I asked, looking at the legal jargon at the top of the page. It is a solution, Hunter said, crossing his arms over his chest. Since you seem so concerned about money, and since you seem determined to extort your parents on my wedding day, we are going to settle this right now. He tapped the document with his finger. This is a waiver of inheritance and non-contest agreement. He explained, his tone condescending, as if speaking to a toddler. It states that you formally renounce any and all claims to the Sterling family estate. It states that you will never sue your parents or Jasmine for any financial support, past, present, or future. It states that you acknowledge that you have been given adequate support throughout your life and that you are owed nothing. I stared at the paper. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted me to sign away my rights. They wanted to legally sever me from the family. And there is a clause at the bottom, Hunter added, leaning in closer, so I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. A non-disclosure agreement. If you sign this, you agree to never speak about family financial matters to the press or on social media. You agree to leave this venue immediately and never contact us again unless invited. And if I don't sign, I asked. Hunter smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. If you don't sign, he said, I will make sure you regret it. My father is a very powerful man, Amara. We have friends in high places. Friends who can make it very difficult for a low-level data entry clerk to find work in this city or any city. We can bury you in legal fees until you are living in a cardboard box. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip. He peeled off 5 $100 bills. But I am a reasonable man, Hunter said. Sign the paper, Amara. Save yourself the embarrassment. Sign it and I will give you $500 cash right now. You can take a taxi back to the airport. You can buy yourself a nice meal. Maybe buy a shirt that doesn't have wine on it. He waved the money in front of my face. $500. It was an insult designed to break me. He was treating me like a prostitute he was paying to leave. I looked at my parents again. Mom. Dad. I said, my voice steady. You are letting him do this. You are letting him threaten me. My father finally looked up. His face was red, not with shame, but with impatience. Just sign it, Amara, he snapped. Don't be difficult. Hunter is right. You are toxic. You bring negative energy. We just want to be happy. Jasmine deserves to be happy. If you love us at all, if you have any decency left, you will sign that paper and leave us alone. My mother nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Please, Amara, she whispered. Do it for the family. Do it for peace. We can't have you ruining this merger. I mean, this marriage. The slip of the tongue was telling. Merger. That was all this was. And I was the liability they needed to liquidate. I looked at the document again. I read the fine print. I, Amara Sterling, hereby waive all rights to the assets of Lawrence and Vivian Sterling, including real estate investments and personal property. A bubble of laughter started to rise in my chest. I fought to keep it down, but it was hard. It was so incredibly ironic. They were forcing me to sign away my claim to their assets. They didn't realize that they had no assets. They didn't realize that their house was already in foreclosure. They didn't realize that their cars were leased. They didn't realize that the very building we were standing in was no longer theirs to host a party in. They were protecting a treasure chest that was empty. And they were threatening the person who actually held the gold. I looked at Hunter. I looked at his smug, arrogant face. He thought he had checkmated me. He thought he was the king of the board. "Give me the pen," I said. Hunter's eyebrows shot up. He hadn't expected me to fold so easily. He smirked, a triumphant look of satisfaction spreading across his face. "Smart girl," he said, handing me a heavy gold fountain pen. "I knew you had a price. Everyone has a price." I took the pen. I took the document. I placed it on the cocktail table. I wasn't signing it because I was scared. I wasn't signing it because I wanted his $500. I was signing it because I wanted to sever the tie legally and permanently. I wanted there to be zero doubt when the dust settled that I owed them nothing. I wanted to make sure that when they came crawling back to me, when the truth came out and they needed a savior, they would have no legal ground to stand on. I was granting their wish. I was leaving the family. I signed my name with a flourish. Amara Sterling. I capped the pen and handed it back to Hunter. "There," I said. "I waived my rights to your fortune." Hunter snatched the paper, handing it to the lawyer, who inspected it and nodded. "Good," Hunter said. He tossed the $500 at me. The bills fluttered to the floor, landing in the dirt. "Take your money and get out," he sneered. "Security will escort you." My mother let out a sigh of relief, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Amara," she said. "You did the right thing." I looked at the money on the floor. I didn't pick it up. I looked at Hunter. "You should keep that," I said, pointing to the cash. "You are going to need it for the taxi." Hunter frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" "My driver is outside." I checked my watch. "Actually," I said, "I don't think he is. I think the repo man just pulled up." Hunter laughed. "You are crazy. Get out of here." I didn't move. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone again. I tapped the screen, opening the connection to the ballroom's audio-visual system. I had hacked into it 10 minutes ago, using the admin password that the previous owner had never changed. "I am not going anywhere!" "Hunter," I said, my voice dropping the facade of the victim and revealing the predator beneath. "But you are right about one thing. We don't do scenes." I tapped the button on my phone. "We do finales." Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom flickered and died, plunging the entire room into darkness. The music cut out with a screech. The crowd gasped, screaming in the sudden blackness. Then a single spotlight beamed down. Not on the head table, not on the cake. It beamed down on me. And behind me, the giant LED screen that was supposed to show a montage of the couple's childhood photos flickered to life. But it didn't show photos. It showed a bank statement. A very specific bank statement with the Sterling family name on it, and a big red stamp that said, "Foreclosure." I stepped back to the microphone, which I had never actually walked away from. "Can everyone hear me now?" I asked. The show was just beginning. The heavy gold Mont Blanc pen felt cold and foreign in my hand, like holding a weapon that had been used to bludgeon me. I stared at the nib hovering just millimeters above the signature line. The paper beneath my hand was crisp and white, a legal death warrant for my relationship with my family. Waiver of rights. Total estrangement. It was all there in black and white, drafted by a lawyer who cost more per hour than my mother made in a month. Hunter stood over me, his arms crossed his chest, puffed out like a rooster who had just chased away a fox. He was smiling, that smug, self-satisfied smile of a man who has never been told no in his entire life. He thought he had won. He thought he had broken me. He thought that by flashing $500 in my face and threatening to ruin a career he knew nothing about, he had forced the unruly peasant back into line. I looked up from the paper. Time seemed to slow down, stretching like taffy. The sounds of the ballroom, the clinking of silverware, the low murmur of gossip, The soft jazz from the band faded into a dull roar in the background. I looked at my parents. Really looked at them. My mother Vivian was clutching her pearl necklace, her eyes fixed on the pen in my hand. She was not looking at my face. She was not looking at the tears that I had fought so hard to suppress. She was looking at the ink. She was practically vibrating with anticipation, waiting for me to sign myself out of her life so she could go back to playing the role of the perfect society matron. There was no sadness in her eyes. There was only relief. Relief that the problem child, the one who asked too many questions, the one who remembered the lies, was finally being erased. My father Lawrence was checking his watch. He looked impatient. He was probably calculating how quickly he could get back to the head table and finish his steak before it got cold. To him, I was just a business transaction that had gone on too long, a bad investment he was cutting his losses on. And Jasmine, my sister, she was watching from the shadows of the dais sipping her champagne. She looked bored. She had won the prize. She had the rich husband, the expensive dress, the Mercedes. She didn't care that her victory was built on the ashes of my dignity. I looked around the room at the guests. The hundreds of people eating and drinking and laughing, they were all part of it. The fake smiles, the judgmental whispers, the shallow alliances. This was the world my parents had sold their souls to enter. This was the world they had stolen my identity to be a part of. And they were right about one thing. I didn't belong here. I didn't belong in a world where family was a currency and love was conditional. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my blazer pocket. It was a sharp, distinctive vibration, not a text, not an email. It was the specific haptic feedback I had set for high-priority, secure notifications from my brokerage firm. My heart skipped a beat. I slowly lowered the pen, but I didn't let go of it. I reached into my pocket with my left hand and pulled out the phone. "What are you doing?" Hunter snapped, his patience fraying. "Stop stalling, Amara. Sign the paper and get out." I ignored him. I glanced at the screen. The message was from my lead counsel, Sarah. It was short. It was simple. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever read. Transaction finalized. Funds cleared. Title transfer recorded. You own 100% of Preston Hills Country Club. Foreclosure proceedings on Sterling residence initiated. It is all yours, boss. The air in my lungs suddenly felt lighter. The crushing weight on my chest, the feeling of being small and helpless evaporated instantly. I wasn't the beggar anymore. I wasn't the sister who needed a loan. I wasn't the data entry clerk. I was the landlord. And they were trespassing. A strange calm washed over me. It was the calm of a hurricane eye, the silence before the absolute devastation. I looked at the legal document one last time. I, Amara Sterling, hereby waive all rights. I started to laugh. It started low in my throat, a rumble of pure dark amusement. Hunter frowned. "Why are you laughing?" "This isn't funny. You are about to be homeless if you don't sign this." I looked up at him, and for the first time he saw the change in my eyes. He saw the predator. He saw the shark that had eaten companies larger than his father's entire portfolio. "You are right, Hunter," I said, my voice steady and strong. "It isn't funny. It is tragic." I stood up slowly, pushing the chair back with my legs. I held the gold pen up to the light, examining it. "This is a nice pen," I said. "What is it? $800? "Sign the paper," Amara, Hunter barked, stepping forward to intimidate me. I looked him dead in the eye. "No." The word hung in the air. "No," Hunter repeated, blinking as if he didn't understand the language. "I said no," I replied. "I am not signing your waiver. I am not signing your NDA. And I am certainly not taking your $500. My father lunged forward, his face purple with rage. "You ungrateful little brat! Do you know what you are doing? You are destroying this family." I looked at Lawrence. "No, Dad," I said. "You destroyed this family when you sold my trust for a party. You destroyed this family when you made me a criminal to pay for Jasmine's vanity. I am just the demolition crew here to clean up the mess. Hunter grabbed my wrist, trying to force my hand toward the paper. You will sign this, he hissed, or I will ruin you. I looked at his hand on my wrist. Then I looked at the pen in my other hand. I don't think so, Hunter, I said. With a sudden violent motion, I snapped the heavy gold pen in half. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet corner. Ink black and permanent exploded out of the cartridge, splattering over Hunter's pristine white tuxedo shirt and onto the legal document. Hunter let go of me, jumping back with a yelp. My shirt? You crazy bitch! You ruined my shirt! I dropped the broken pieces of the pen onto the ink-soaked waiver. Consider that my counteroffer, I said. My mother screamed, Security! Get her out of here! Get her out! Two large security guards started moving toward me from the edge of the room. They looked menacing. They were used to throwing out drunks and crashers. But I wasn't afraid. I turned and walked away from the family. I didn't run toward the exit. I walked straight toward the center of the room, toward the stage. Amara. Stop, my father yelled, chasing after me. I didn't stop. I walked with purpose. My heels clicked rhythmically on the hardwood floor, a countdown to their destruction. The MC, a local radio personality hired for the night, saw me coming. He looked confused. He held the microphone out as if to block me. Excuse me, miss, he said. The speeches aren't until dessert. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't ask for the mic. I took it. I snatched the microphone from his hand with a grip that made him flinch. I turned to face the room. The feedback whined for a split second, a high-pitched screech that made everyone cover their ears. Then silence. I stood center stage. The spotlight hit me. It illuminated the wine stain on my chest, which now looked like a medal of valor. It illuminated the ink on my hands. It illuminated the fire in my eyes. My parents and Hunter were frozen at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at me in horror. They knew. Deep down they knew that whatever I was about to say would change everything. I looked out at the sea of faces, the wealthy, the powerful, the fake. I took a deep breath. My name is Amara Sterling, I said, my voice booming through the speakers, clear and unwavering. And I have an announcement to make. Hunter started running up the stairs. Cut the mic, he screamed to the sound engineer. Cut the sound. But the sound engineer didn't cut the mic. Because earlier that evening when I was talking to the staff, I had tipped him $500. I watched Hunter rushing toward me. It was too late. The transaction was done. The truth was out, and the beggar was about to become the queen. The high-pitched whine of audio feedback sliced through the tension in the ballroom like a knife, causing 200 guests to wince and cover their ears. I did not apologize. I stood center stage, bathed in the harsh white light of the spotlight, holding the microphone with a grip that turned my knuckles white. My father, Lawrence, was halfway up the stairs, his face twisted into a mask of violent rage. He looked like a man possessed, a man whose carefully constructed reality was shattering before his eyes, and his only instinct was to destroy the person holding the hammer. Get down from there, he roared, his voice cracking. I will kill you. I swear to God, Amara, I will drag you down myself. He lunged for my legs, his hands outstretched like claws. I did not move. I did not flinch. I simply watched him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a rabid animal. But before his fingers could graze the fabric of my trousers, a wall of black suits materialized between us. The two security guards who had been standing in the shadows stepped forward with synchronized precision. They were massive men with necks as thick as tree trunks, and they moved with a speed that belied their size. One of them caught my father by the lapels of his velvet tuxedo jacket, halting his momentum instantly. The other stepped in front of me, acting as a human shield. Let go of me, Lawrence screamed, struggling against the guard's grip like a trapped rat. Do you know who I am? I am the host. I am the one paying your salary. Unhand me this instant, or I will have your badge. The guard did not let go. He did not even blink. He looked over his shoulder at me, his expression respectful and awaiting instruction. I leaned into the microphone. Actually, Dad, I said, my voice booming through the speakers, calm and amplified. You are not the one paying their salary. Not anymore. A hush fell over the room, the kind of silence that is heavy and suffocating. The guests stared open-mouthed at the spectacle of the father of the bride being restrained by his own hired muscle. From the side of the stage, Mr. Henderson, the general manager of the Preston Hills Country Club, walked out. He was a stiff, formal man who usually terrified the staff, but tonight he looked different. He looked relieved. He walked past my father, ignoring Lawrence's sputtered demands, and came directly to me. He stopped 3 feet away and bowed his head slightly. It was a gesture of deference that sent a shockwave through the room. Madam Chairwoman, Mr. Henderson said, his voice clear enough for the front row to hear. I apologize for the disturbance. We received the confirmation of the ownership transfer 10 minutes ago. How would you like us to handle these trespassers? Lawrence stopped struggling. He went limp in the guard's grip, staring at Mr. Henderson with eyes that were about to pop out of his head. Chairwoman, he whispered. What are you talking about? She is a data entry clerk. She is a nobody. I smiled. It was a cold smile. Show them, I said to the sound engineer in the booth. Behind me, the giant LED screen flickered. The image of the foreclosure notice disappeared, replaced by a high-resolution scan of a property deed. It was dated today. It bore the seal of the county clerk. And at the bottom, in bold, unmistakable letters, was the name of the new owner. Amara Sterling, CEO. Sterling Distressed Assets, LLC. I turned to the screen, pointing at the document. You see, Dad? I said, addressing him directly. When you told me you spent my house fund on a deposit for this venue, you forgot to mention that the venue itself was in financial trouble. The previous owners were defaulting on their loans. They were desperate for a buyer. And since I happen to specialize in buying distressed assets from desperate people, it was a match made in heaven. I turned back to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, welcome to my club. I am afraid there has been a change in management, and the new management has a very strict policy against hosting parties for people who steal from their children. I looked down at Lawrence, who was now pale and trembling. So, to answer your question, Dad, I said, this party is officially over. The room erupted. It was chaos. People were gasping, pulling out their phones to record, whispering frantically to each other. The illusion of the Sterling family's wealth and power had not just cracked, it had been pulverized. But I was not done. I had taken the castle, but I still needed to take the crown. I looked down at the head table where Jasmine was standing. She was shaking, her face a mixture of terror and fury. She looked like a beauty queen whose sash had been ripped away. You are a liar, she screamed, her voice shrill and hysterical. You are a liar, Amara. You are just jealous because I am the beautiful one. You are the beggar. You are the one who drives a Honda. This is a prank. It has to be a prank. Hunter, do something. She grabbed Hunter's arm, but he pulled away from her as if she were on fire. He was staring at the screen, reading the deed, doing the math in his head, realizing that he had backed the wrong horse. I am not a liar, Jasmine, I said, my voice cutting through her screams. And I am not a beggar. But you are a thief. I pointed a finger at her, a long, accusing finger that felt like a judgment from above. And I want my property back. What property? Jasmine spat, clutching her chest. I don't have anything of yours. I wouldn't touch anything of yours. The dress, I said simply. Jasmine froze. She looked down at the Vera Wang gown, the $20,000 masterpiece of lace and silk. This dress, she laughed nervously. This is my dress. Mommy and Daddy bought it for me. I shook my head. No, Jasmine. Mommy and Daddy didn't buy it. I did. I signaled the booth again. The image on the screen changed. Gone was the deed. In its place was a bank statement. My bank statement. It showed a wire transfer of $50,000, and right below it, a transfer from my parents' account to the bridal salon for exactly $22,000, labeled Jasmine Gown Rush Order. The dates matched perfectly. The money left my account and hit theirs, and within an hour it was at the dress shop. The audience gasped. The proof was undeniable. It was a digital paper trail of theft. "That is grand larceny, Jasmine," I said, my voice hard as granite. "That dress was purchased with stolen funds. It is considered proceeds of a crime. And since the money was mine, that dress is legally mine." Jasmine clutched the fabric of the skirt, her knuckles white. "You can't be serious. It is my wedding day." "It is not a wedding," I corrected her. "It is a crime scene. And I am collecting evidence." I looked at Mr. Henderson. "Call the police," I said calmly. "I would like to report a theft in progress. The suspect is wearing the stolen merchandise." "No!" Jasmine shrieked. "You can't do this. You can't arrest me on my wedding day." "Then give it back," I said. "Right now." "Give it back," she asked, looking around wildly. "Here, in front of everyone." I shrugged. "You have two choices, Jasmine. Choice A. You can go to the back room right now, take off that dress and hand it to Mr. Henderson. If you do that, I won't press charges. Choice B. The police arrive in 5 minutes. They will arrest you. They will take you to the station. And they will strip search you there and book you for a felony." I checked my watch. "You have 5 minutes." Jasmine looked at our parents. They were useless. Lawrence was slumped in a chair, defeated. Vivian was crying into a napkin. She looked at Hunter. "Hunter, help me," she sobbed. "Buy the dress. Pay her back. Please." Hunter looked at me. He looked at the shark on stage who owned the building. Then he looked at Jasmine, the sobbing fraud in a stolen dress. He turned his back on her. "I think you should do what she says, Jasmine," he said coldly. "I am not getting involved in a felony." Jasmine let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. It was the sound of total defeat. "Fine!" she screamed. "Fine! Take the damn dress! I hope you choke on it!" She gathered up the heavy skirts and ran. She ran toward the kitchen doors, her veil trailing behind her like a surrender flag. I waited. The room waited. Nobody moved. The band did not play. The waiters did not serve. We all just watched the kitchen doors. 4 minutes later, the doors swung open. Jasmine walked out. She was not wearing the Vera Wang. She was not wearing silk. She was wearing an oversized gray busboy uniform that was 3 sizes too big for her. It was stained with grease. It smelled of dishwater. She was barefoot, holding her expensive heels in one hand. She looked small. She looked pathetic. She looked exactly like what she was, a fraud who had been stripped of her costume. Mr. Henderson walked out behind her, carrying the white dress carefully in a garment bag. He brought it to the stage and laid it at my feet. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said into the mic. I looked down at Jasmine standing in the middle of the dance floor in her gray rags. "You finally look like you belong at table 19, Jasmine," I said. I looked out at the silent, stunned crowd. "Now," I said, "everyone please leave. My cleaning crew needs to sanitize the building. I want the stench of this family out of my property by midnight." I dropped the mic. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. And I walked off the stage, leaving them in the ruins of the party they never really owned. The silence that followed Jasmine's humiliating exit was heavy and suffocating, like a wool blanket soaked in water. I stood alone on the stage, the microphone still in my hand, watching the double doors swing shut behind my sister. The guests were frozen in their seats, terrified to move, terrified to breathe lest they draw my attention. But I was not looking at them. I was looking at the 2 people huddled at the bottom of the stairs. My parents, Lawrence and Vivian Sterling. For 32 years they had been the giants in my world, the arbiters of my worth, the gatekeepers of my happiness. But looking at them now, stripped of their pretenses and their pride, they looked remarkably small. Lawrence was trembling, his face a map of ruin. Vivian was clutching her chest, her eyes darting around the room looking for an escape route that did not exist. They realized that with Jasmine gone, they were the only targets left. Lawrence took a step toward the stage. He did not run this time. He walked slowly, his posture slumped. He looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw tears in his eyes. Amara. He croaked, his voice barely audible without the microphone. Please, that is enough. You have made your point. You have ruined the wedding. You have humiliated your sister. Are you happy now? Can we please just go home and discuss this like a family? I looked down at him. The word family sounded like a curse coming from his mouth. Go home, I repeated into the microphone, my voice echoing through the silent hall. That is an interesting choice of words, Dad, because that is actually the next item on the agenda. Vivian let out a strangled sob. She rushed forward, grabbing the hem of my trousers. She was kneeling on the floor in her expensive gown, not out of reverence, but out of desperation. Amara, stop, she begged. Don't do this. This is private. This is family business. You cannot air our laundry in front of the Hunters, in front of the senator. Think about our reputation. I looked at her hand clutching my leg. I didn't kick her away, but I didn't help her up either. You are right, Mom, I said coldly. It is family business. That is the only reason I know about the mortgage. I signaled the sound booth. The screen behind me changed again. The image of the stolen dress receipt vanished. In its place appeared a document that was even more damning. It was a foreclosure notice stamped with the seal of the Georgia Superior Court. The crowd gasped. I heard whispers of foreclosure, and they are broke rippling through the room. You see, I continued ignoring my mother's wails. When you told me you needed money for the wedding, you forgot to mention where the rest of the money came from. You didn't just steal from me, you stole from your future. You took out a second mortgage on the family estate, and then a third. You leveraged every brick and beam of that house to pay for appearances. Lawrence looked at the screen, his face turning the color of ash. How did you get that? He whispered. That is confidential banking information. It was confidential, I corrected him. Until the bank decided you were a liability. You haven't made a mortgage payment in 4 months, Dad. You prioritized the caterer over the roof over your head. You prioritized Jasmine's Mercedes over the property tax. The bank was getting ready to seize the house next Tuesday. I paused, letting the reality sink in. But they didn't want the bad publicity of evicting a prominent family, I said. So they looked for a buyer for the debt, someone who could pay cash, someone who wouldn't mind doing the dirty work. I leaned down, looking my father in the eye. They called me Dad. They called your daughter the data entry clerk, and I wrote them a check this morning. Vivian screamed a high-pitched sound of pure terror. No, you didn't. You wouldn't. I did, Mom, I said, straightening up. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Sterling Distressed Assets owns the note on your house. I am your landlord. I am your bank. And unfortunately, you are terrible tenants. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was an eviction notice. You have violated the terms of your mortgage, I announced, my voice devoid of emotion. You are in default. And since I have zero tolerance for delinquency, I am accelerating the foreclosure process. I dropped the paper. It fluttered down, landing on my father's shoulder. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, I said. My legal team will be there at noon tomorrow to change the locks. You can take your personal effects, but the furniture, the art, the jewelry, that stays. It is collateral against the debt you owe me. Lawrence fell to his knees. He crumbled like a statue made of sand. Amara, please, he wept openly now. Where will we go? We have nowhere to go. We are old. You can't put your parents on the street. I looked at him. I remembered the $15 he had thrown at me in the parking lot. I remembered him telling me to take a bus. I hear the Motel 6 by the airport has vacancies, I said. It is affordable. You should still have that $15 you tried to give me. That will get you a warm coffee at least. Vivian saw that begging wasn't working. She saw that her life of luxury was ending in 24 hours. Her brain couldn't handle the trauma, or perhaps she thought she had one last card to play, the sympathy card. She stood up abruptly, swayed dramatically, and put her hand to her forehead. My heart, she gasped loudly for the audience. Oh God, my heart, I can't breathe, Amara, you are killing me. And then, with a theatrical groan, she collapsed. She fell to the floor in a heap of silk and diamonds right at my feet. The room erupted in shouts. Someone call 911. She fainted. I looked down at my mother. I saw her eyelids flutter. I saw her hand adjust her skirt slightly so it wouldn't bunch up. It was a performance, a desperate attempt to turn me into the villain who gave her mother a heart attack. I didn't call for a medic. I didn't kneel down to check her pulse. I stepped over her. I literally stepped over my mother's body like she was a pile of laundry I had been meaning to put away. She is fine, I said into the mic, my voice bored. She did the same thing when Macy's declined her credit card in '98. If she is still on the floor in 5 minutes, feel free to drag her out. I walked past them. I walked past the wreckage of my family. I had taken their pride. I had taken their house. I had taken their power. But there was one person left standing: Hunter. The groom was standing near the cake table, his arms crossed, trying to look detached. He was trying to pretend that this tragedy had nothing to do with him. He was a hunter after all. He was royalty. He thought he was above the fray. I walked toward him. The spotlight followed me, cutting a path through the darkness. Hunter saw me coming. He straightened his tie. He put on his politician's face, the one he used when he was lying to voters. "Stay away from me, Amara," he warned, his voice trying to sound authoritative but wavering slightly. "This has nothing to do with me. Your family is crazy. I am glad I found out now. I am annulling the marriage. I am washing my hands of you people." I stopped 5 feet away from him. "Washing your hands?" I asked, tilting my head. "That is funny, Hunter, because usually you need soap to wash your hands. And from what I see, you can't even afford water." Hunter laughed, a nervous, incredulous laugh. "Excuse me, do you know who I am? My father is Senator Hunter. We are the bedrock of this state. We have more money in our couch cushions than you have in your entire portfolio. You think because you bought a mortgage you are a big shot? You are nothing. You are new money. We are old money." "Old money," I repeated, nodding slowly. "You are right. It is very old. So old it died about 10 years ago." I signaled the booth for the final time. The screen flashed. A new document appeared. But this wasn't a deed or a bank statement. It was a trading terminal view. A Bloomberg terminal screen showing a stock ticker plummeting in real time. It was a red line going straight down like a cliff. Hunter turned to look at the screen. He squinted. "What is that?" he asked. "That is Hunter Holdings," I said. "Your father's private equity firm, the firm that holds all your family's wealth, the firm that funds your lifestyle, your cars, and this wedding." Hunter scoffed. "So stocks go down, they go up. It is the market." "Not this time," I said. "You see, Hunter, for the last 6 months, the SEC has been investigating your father for money laundering and tax evasion. It was a sealed investigation. Nobody knew." Hunter went pale. "How do you know that?" he whispered. "Because I am the one who tipped them off," I said simply. The room went deadly silent. Even the people who were whispering stopped. This was not just family drama anymore. This was federal. "I found the discrepancies when I was doing due diligence on your family," I explained. "I wanted to see who my sister was marrying. And I found a shell game, Ponzi schemes, offshore accounts. It was sloppy, Hunter. Very sloppy." I took a step closer. "But that is not the best part," I said. "The best part is the bonds. Your father issued corporate bonds to cover his losses, high-yield junk bonds. Nobody wanted to touch them. They were toxic. Except me." I smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. "My firm bought 100% of your family's debt, Hunter. We own every single bond. And do you know what happens when a company gets investigated for fraud? It triggers a clause in the bond agreement. An immediate repayment clause." Hunter looked at his phone. It was buzzing. He stared at the screen. It was his father. "Answer it," I said. "Put it on speaker." Hunter didn't want to, but his hands were shaking so bad he hit the button automatically. "Hunter," his father's voice screamed through the phone, sobbing and hysterical. "It is over. They are here. The FBI is here. They are seizing everything. The accounts are frozen. We have nothing, son. Don't sign anything. We have nothing. The call cut off. Hunter dropped the phone. It clattered on the floor next to my mother, who was still pretending to be unconscious, but had definitely flinched at the news. I looked at Hunter. The golden boy. The prince. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket. You said I was nothing. I said softly. You said I was a beggar. I gestured to the screen where the stock price had hit 0. I am the one who just foreclosed on your dynasty, Hunter. You are not a rich man anymore. You are the son of a felon. You have no trust fund. You have no assets. You don't even have a job because your job was working for your daddy. Hunter fell back against the cake table. His hand knocked over the 5-tier wedding cake. It crashed to the floor, a spectacular mess of fondant and sugar, creating a barrier of debris between us. It is fitting, I said, looking at the ruined cake. I looked at him, and then I looked at the kitchen door, where Jasmine was hiding. You and Jasmine are perfect for each other, I said. You are both frauds, you are both broke, and you both thought you were better than me. I turned to the crowd. The show is over, I announced. I walked toward the exit. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could hear the sound of Hunter sobbing. I could hear my father begging the security guards. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air. The valet was waiting. He wasn't standing by my Honda. He was standing by a sleek black Bentley that my assistant had just pulled around. I handed the valet a $100 bill. Keep the Honda, I said. I don't need it anymore. I got into the back seat of the Bentley. As the car pulled away, I watched the lights of the Preston Hills Country Club fade in the rearview mirror. It was my club now. My property. They had called me a beggar. I checked my bank account balance on my phone. The numbers were astronomical. I closed my eyes and finally, for the first time in years, I slept. The ballroom had transformed into a gladiator arena of misery. The air was no longer filled with the scent of roses and expensive perfume, but with the acrid smell of fear and the copper tang of betrayal. I stood near the exit watching the fallout of my revelation ripple through the room like a shockwave. The Hunter family, who just minutes ago had been looking down their noses at us from the summit of their moral high ground, were now tearing at each other like starving dogs. Senator Hunter, the patriarch who had shaken my father's hand with a politician's practiced warmth, was now purple with rage. He was screaming into his phone, trying to reach lawyers who were likely already shredding documents. But when that failed, he turned his fury on the nearest target. My parents. You did this, the senator roared, pointing a trembling finger at Lawrence and Vivian. You brought this curse into our lives. We were fine until we met you people. You are bad luck. You are a plague. Vivian, who had miraculously recovered from her fainting spell when the stock market crashed, was trying to grab Mrs. Hunter's hand. Eleanor, please. She sobbed, mascara running down her face in black rivulets. We didn't know. We are victims, too. Amara is mentally unstable. She is doing this to hurt us. Mrs. Hunter slapped my mother's hand away with a force that made her diamond bracelets jingle. Don't touch me, you fraud. Eleanor spat, her voice losing all its cultivated refinement. You are nothing but grifters. You tricked us. You wanted to marry your trashy daughter into our family to pay off your debts. You knew we were vulnerable and you preyed on us. You are not a socialite, Vivian. You are a parasite. The accusation was rich, coming from a woman whose fortune was built on Ponzi schemes, but self-awareness was not a commodity present in this room. In the center of the chaos stood Jasmine and Hunter, the bride and groom, the symbols of this unholy union. Jasmine was shivering in her oversized gray busboy uniform, her hair a mess, her face blotchy from crying. She looked at Hunter with desperate eyes. She still thought there was a way out. She still thought that if she just loved him enough or manipulated him enough, she could fix this. Hunter, she whimpered, reaching out to touch his arm. Baby, look at me. It doesn't matter. The money doesn't matter. We love each other. We can start over. My sister is crazy, but we don't need her. We can build our own life. Hunter looked at her. He looked at the grease stains on her uniform. He looked at her bare feet standing amidst the wreckage of the wedding cake. And then he looked at me, standing cool and untouched in the distance. His brain cracked. The pressure of losing his inheritance, his status, and his future, all in under 5 minutes, was too much. He needed a scapegoat. And he decided that Jasmine was not a victim of my revenge, but a co-conspirator. You think I am stupid? Hunter yelled, his voice breaking. You think I don't see what this is? What are you talking about? Jasmine cried. This was a setup, Hunter screamed. You and your sister. You planned this. Good cop, bad cop. You get me to the altar, you get me to sign the marriage license, and then she bankrupts my father so you can divorce me and take half of whatever is left. You are not a victim, Jasmine. You are a black widow. No, Hunter. No, Jasmine pleaded, stepping closer. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Liar, Hunter shrieked. And then he did the unforgivable. He didn't just walk away. He pulled his hand back and struck her. The sound of the slap was sickeningly loud, echoing off the high ceilings. It knocked Jasmine sideways. She fell into the remains of the cake frosting smearing across her face, mixing with her tears. The room gasped, but nobody moved to help her. My father didn't move. My mother didn't move. They were too busy begging the senator for mercy. I watched from the door. A part of me, the old Amara, wanted to rush forward and protect my little sister. But the new Amara, the one who had been forged in the fire of their neglect, stayed put. Jasmine had spent her life chasing a man who valued her only for her aesthetic. Now she saw what lay beneath the tuxedo. She needed to feel that floor. She needed to taste that frosting. Hunter stood over her, breathing hard. I am annulling this marriage, he spat. You are nothing to me. You are a beggar, just like your sister said. He turned and stormed toward the exit, pushing past guests who were scrambling to get out of his way. When he passed me, he didn't even look up. He was a broken man running from his own shadow. The guests began to flee. It was a stampede of silk and tuxedos. Nobody wanted to be associated with the Sterlings or the Hunters anymore. The social climbers who had fought for an invitation were now fighting for the door. In the middle of the empty dance floor, my parents stood alone. The Hunters had left. Jasmine was sobbing on the floor. The staff were starting to clear the tables under my strict orders. Lawrence Sterling looked around at the ruins of his life. He looked at the foreclosure notice still on the screen. He looked at his weeping wife. And then his eyes landed on me. I was his only lifeline. I was the only person in the room with power. I watched the gears turn in his head. I watched him swallow his pride. I watched him compose his face into a mask of fatherly affection that was so grotesque it almost made me laugh. He walked toward me. He stepped over his crying daughter without a glance. He walked past his wife. He came straight to me, his arms open wide. Amara, he said, his voice trembling with forced emotion. Amara, my girl. I didn't move. I stood my ground, my arms crossed. Stop right there, Dad, I said. He stopped a few feet away. He wiped a tear from his eye, a tear that I knew was fake. You are amazing, he said, shaking his head as if in awe. You really are. I always knew it. I always knew you had this fire in you. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Is that why you threw $15 at me in the parking lot? Lawrence chuckled nervously, waving his hand as if dismissing a silly misunderstanding. Oh, Amara, don't you see? He said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. That was the test. The test, I repeated. Yes, the test, Lawrence said, his eyes wide and earnest. I knew you were too soft, Amara. I knew you needed to be pushed. I knew that if I coddled you like I coddled Jasmine, you would never reach your full potential. I had to be hard on you. I had to make you angry because I knew that anger would drive you to succeed. He took a step closer, reaching for my hand. And look at you, he said, gesturing to my suit. You are a CEO. You own buildings. You own debt. You are a shark, Amara, just like me. I did this. I made you who you are. The foreclosure, the stolen identity, it was all just motivation. I was playing the villain so you could become the hero. It was the most breathtaking display of narcissism I had ever witnessed. He was rewriting history in real time, trying to take credit for my success, trying to frame his abuse as a twisted form of love. He smiled, waiting for me to accept this new narrative, waiting for me to fall into his arms and thank him for traumatizing me into success. So you see, he continued gaining confidence. We are a team, Amara. You and me. The smart ones. Now that you have proven yourself, we can drop the act. You can call off the lawyers. We can combine our assets. With your capital and my connections, we can rule this city. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had never attended a single one of my graduations, the man who had sold my future to buy a party. I uncrossed my arms. I let a small smile play on my lips. A test, I said softly. Yes, Lawrence said, nodding eagerly. Exactly. A test. I looked him dead in the eye. The smile vanished. Well, Dad, I said, my voice ice cold. The test is over. Lawrence's smile faltered. And I have the results, I continued. I leaned in close so he could hear every syllable. You failed. I stepped back. You didn't make me, Dad, I said. You didn't motivate me. You survived me. There is a difference. And as for your connections, you don't have any. You are a toxic asset, and I am liquidating you. I signaled the security guards. Get them out, I ordered. Lawrence sputtered, his face turning red again. You can't do this. I am your father. I made you. Security grabbed him by the arms. They grabbed Vivian, who was screaming. They grabbed Jasmine, who was still crying on the floor. I watched as my family was dragged out of the ballroom, kicking and screaming. They looked like trash being taken to the curb. I stood alone in the center of the room. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. The ballroom was finally quiet. The only sounds left were the gentle clinking of silverware as the staff began to clear the debris of a dynasty that had crumbled in less than an hour. I stood in the center of the empty dance floor, looking at the space where just moments ago my family had tried to destroy me. It felt different now. It didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like an asset. My asset. Mr. Henderson, the general manager, walked up to me quietly. He looked shaken but respectful. The staff were watching me from the edges of the room, uncertain of their fate. They had just watched me evict my own parents, and they were terrified that they were next. Madam Chairwoman Henderson said softly, "What are your instructions regarding the remaining guests? And the staff? Should we send everyone home?" I looked at the waiters, the busboys, the cleaners. I saw David, the young waiter who had tried to help me earlier, still clutching his tray. I saw the fear in their eyes. They weren't worried about social status. They were worried about rent. No, I said, my voice carrying clearly to the corners of the room. The party is over for the Sterlings and the Hunters, but not for you. I turned to address the staff directly. I want every security guard, every waiter, every chef, and every cleaner to gather round. They shuffled forward, nervously. You all witnessed something ugly tonight, I told them. You saw people who have everything treat you like you are nothing. You saw them look down on you while eating food you prepared and drinking wine you poured. I paused, making eye contact with David. My family thought they were better than you because they had money, I said. But they didn't have money. They were bankrupt. You are the ones who actually work. You are the ones who actually generate value. And I respect that. I pulled out my phone and opened the payroll app that was now linked to my master account. I am authorizing a $500 cash bonus for every single employee working tonight, I announced. Consider it hazard pay for having to deal with my family. A collective gasp went through the room, followed by smiles and even a few tears. $500 was a lifeline for many of them. And one more thing I added. Pack up all the food. The lobster, the steak, the untouched desserts. Take it all home to your families. Don't throw a single ounce of it away. If the Sterlings can't pay for it, they certainly aren't going to eat it. But you will. Thank you, ma'am. David said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much. I nodded. Clean up the hall, lock the doors, and if any of them try to come back inside, call the police immediately. This is private property. I turned and walked toward the grand entrance. My heels clicked on the marble floor, a sound of finality. I felt lighter with every step. The heavy cloak of obligation of trying to please people who could not be pleased had finally slipped off my shoulders. I pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out into the night air. It was crisp and cool, a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. The valet stand was busy, but not with guests leaving. It was busy with my family trying to figure out how to leave. They were huddled together on the sidewalk, a pathetic cluster of ruined finery. My mother was sitting on a concrete bench, shivering in her silk gown. My father was pacing back and forth, furiously tapping on his phone, trying to find a friend who hadn't blocked him yet. Jasmine was sitting on the curb, still barefoot, picking at the hem of her gray uniform. Hunter was nowhere to be seen, presumably having run off into the night to escape the shame. When they saw me emerge from the club, they froze. Lawrence stopped pacing. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and begging. He opened his mouth, probably to launch one last guilt trip or one last demand. But I didn't stop walking. I didn't even slow down. I walked past them as if they were invisible, as if they were part of the landscaping. Amara. My mother called out, her voice weak and trembling. Amara, please. Amara. We can't get an Uber. Our cards are declined. Just give us a ride. Just a ride to the motel. I kept walking. Amara, my father yelled. Don't you walk away from me. I am your father. You owe us this much. I stopped then. I didn't turn around. I just stood there for a second, letting the silence stretch. I owe you nothing, I said to the night air. I paid my debts. I reached the curb. The valet saw me coming. He didn't run to get my old Honda Civic, the one my father had ridiculed earlier. Instead, he signaled to the dark corner of the lot. A sleek black Bentley Mulsanne pulled up its headlights, cutting through the darkness. It was a beast of a car, powerful and elegant. My assistant Sarah was driving. She hopped out and opened the rear door for me. My family gasped. They stared at the car with hungry, envious eyes. They recognized the vehicle. It was the kind of car they had pretended to afford for years. Is that yours? Jasmine whispered from the curb, her eyes wide. It is a company car, I said simply, getting into the plush leather seat. And I am the company. I sat back as Sarah closed the door with a solid, reassuring thud. The soundproofing cut off my father's yelling instantly. Inside it was quiet. It smelled of expensive leather and peace. Drive, I said. As the car pulled away, I looked out the tinted window. I watched the scene recede into the distance. I saw my father arguing with a taxi driver who was refusing to take them without cash up front. I saw my mother crying into her hands. I saw Jasmine sitting alone in the dirt. They looked small. They looked like strangers. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened my contacts list. I found the group chat labeled Sterling Family, the chat where they had planned parties without me, the chat where they had made fun of my clothes, the chat where they had plotted to steal my future. I didn't send a goodbye message. I didn't write a long explanation. I simply pressed block. Then I went to each individual contact. Lawrence, Vivian, Jasmine, block, block, block. One by one, I erased them from my digital life, just as I had erased them from my physical one. I put the phone down and looked ahead at the road. The city lights of Atlanta were twinkling in the distance. I had a meeting on Monday to discuss the redevelopment of the country club. I had a portfolio to manage. I had a life to live, a life that was entirely mine. They had called me a beggar. They had mocked my thriftiness. They had mistaken my silence for weakness and my patience for submission. But as the Bentley accelerated onto the highway, leaving the past in the rearview mirror, I realized the truth. I wasn't the beggar. I never was. I was the bill collector. And tonight the account was finally settled, closed, zero balance. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the engine lull me into a state of profound relaxation. For the first time in 32 years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for the criticism. I wasn't waiting for the betrayal. I was free, and that was worth every single penny. This story reminds us that true worth is never defined by the opinions of others, even when those opinions come from the people who raised us. For years, Amara allowed her family to mistake her silence for weakness and her kindness for foolishness. But her journey teaches us a powerful truth: the most expensive thing you can ever pay is the price of your own dignity. Breaking free from toxic family dynamics isn't an act of betrayal, it is an act of survival. We learn that while you cannot choose your blood relatives, you can always choose your peace, your boundaries, and your freedom. If you have ever had to stand alone to stand up for yourself, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that being the black sheep often just means you are the only one telling the truth.